Yeah, we'll do it towards the end. Make sure that I'm heard and not mumbling. I thank you. I thank you for that warm reception, and I must say, I thank Howard Lopez for very kindly thinking of me and inviting me to attend a number of weeks ago. This was before Christmas, and I immediately found sort of the warm welcome here in the room. Very, very satisfying and very sort of community minded, and I appreciate that very much. As Howard has given you the brief introduction to my work, I describe myself formally as a storyteller, but I've also too, as life has moved on, I've realized something very important that I'd like to share with you in the room is that I've had the privilege, although not coming from a family of arts background, although there was some music in the family and parties and whatnot, but there was no direct sort of music or arts influence on me. But at the age of 14, when I began high school, I was introduced to music and specifically percussion instruments, the drums. Are we okay? The drums, and that became quite magical. And I'll come back to that in a moment because I want to address or speak about the influence that each one of us in this room can possibly have on a young person and set a trajectory for a lifetime. That's what has occurred to me. That's what's happened to me. I feel blessed. And also, very specifically, I look at my work in film, television, music, visual arts as a calling. It's been a devotion. It is. I am proud to say that I've made a living and a fairly good living, raised a family and kids on income, all based on the arts. Between music and painting and film and television, my life has been devoted and solely focused on that. And despite, as we know, things don't always work out the way we want to in terms of ups and downs, but through it all, here I am today in my 70s, looking back at over a 60-year career in accomplishments. And I attribute that to somehow having that seed of inspiration from very young and being very determined to follow that path despite not knowing where the next step lie, but just having faith in life and that things would unfold if that's how we felt in our spirits. I'll come back to that theme in a moment, which I refer to it as having an angel in our life. And it's something maybe everybody in this room might consider somebody, for example, that way back when you were young or along the way, came into your life, entered your life, and happened to have some kind of influence on you in one way or other that really changed your direction for the better and launched you into something that you could describe today, as I do, as being an extremely fulfilled person. My life's work has allowed for that fulfillment. So as Howard has mentioned, I arrived here in the county 20 years ago, and I encountered John Burns, and I had been slowly transitioning from a long-term career specifically focused on film and television. I continued to be involved in that medium, but I'd always had a fascination for the theatrical arts. What appealed to me there was their immediacy, their very sort of human qualities, and also understanding that in live performance, nothing is ever going to be repeated twice. What we might see one evening is likely to be different, could be very different, but very subtly different on the next night. And that's part of our human nature to be able to understand and do that. Whereas my focus in films, which I've totally enjoyed, has informed me. My documentary work, which has been extensive, allowing me to travel the country from one end to the other and be privileged to be welcomed into communities, into their archives and research to tell the story of places and tell them not from the standpoint as an outsider coming in, but to withdraw from the community itself, to extract themes that I thought key to a community, and through interviews to bring that story out from the community as an inside out look at their place, how it has evolved, their historical context, what do we see today, how do we learn from that. I ended up with an idea that started here in Ontario with a pilot program that I self-funded, and which carried me through a period of my life of 10 years, which I lived on the road, traveling consistently through Canada, living, staying in all of these, in various places from Labrador to the Northwest Territories. And I did so in 102 communities across the country, got to know people. And one thing that I did insist, and it very much relates to the work that I am doing today, we're doing today in theater, is that as a filmmaker, and especially after having left the networks, the period of time as a filmmaker and going out there to produce work, I insisted on always, because I would come in, I would do research, I would get an understanding of a story. I would do 2 or 3 communities and bring in a film crew, and we go through the production of that program. And just before it was actually going to hit the air, I insisted on going back to those communities, and premiere screening would be set up of the film I did, which was me witnessing their community from the outside, but the story being told from the inside. And I did that specifically for one reason, is that I insisted on leaving copies of that program with the community itself, with the libraries, with their political spectrum, with individuals, so that they themselves would have a souvenir or a copy of this that could be used to their value. That was a response to working in network and larger formats, where there'd be multiple people within a crew, and you would ask somebody in the community, was their film crew ever in here? And they would mention, yes, one of the networks, but we never saw the results. And that turned me around to say, this needs to be interactive. There's a lot of giving to a community, therefore I need to give back, such as the Rotary message I just heard. So one of the things along the line that I have done through the choices. I began, as I mentioned, playing music at the age of 14. By the age of 15, that same music teacher, who was a full-time musician and teaching in the daytime, was encouraging enough of my work, because I grabbed a hold of those drums and percussion and would bring them home, and I'd go down the basement at my parents' place, and I did nothing but put on jazz records and just play quietly myself. My friends would be going to dances with the Beatles and whatnot. But I was very happy being that part of me which can be introverted, and very happy just to feel that growth and being there in the dark and entering a world of music that was very profound to me. And apparently that worked, not that that was the goal, but just by doing that, by the age of 15, my music teacher, who had a full-time band playing 5 nights a week, this is in the Ottawa Hull area, said to me one day, he said, Beaubein, he said, ask your father if you can play a gig for me on Thursday night. My drummer can't make it, but you'll be fine. I get permission from the union, and you're underage, but you'll be fine. So here I am, a 15-year-old kid up there with a 5-piece jazz band, with players playing some of the best in the area. And to my surprise, at the end of the job, the bass player said to me, hey, kid, what are you doing on this date? We need a drummer. And the sax player said similar. And by the time as I moved through high school, and I was reasonably proficient at school, although it wasn't a huge attraction to me. By the time I moved through high school, I think by grade 12 or 13, that my chemistry teacher was Mr. Bach in the daytime, and he was Ronnie, the bass player, at night. My music teacher was Donnie in the daytime, but my English teacher was Donnie Davidson, but it was Mr. Davidson, but Donnie Davidson at night, the guitar player. So my world overlapped between the teen. And the one thing to point out, being in Ottawa, the blessing there was that there's 2 main bands supported by the federal government, and one of them is the Air Force Band. The Air Force Band, they play, they rehearse every day, they travel. They're full-time musicians. That's all they do. The RCMP Band, very similar, but the difference between the 2 cultures is that the RCMP Band were not allowed to gig at night to play out. Whereas the Air Force Band, they were wide open for that. So they developed what we call chops, real chops of playing out there in the real world, bringing their music, but bringing their energy and their talent. And it took me a while to realize that that was the crowd I was moving in. And I recognized that. And that was truly handed to a young kid, sort of on a platter to be able to work with that caliber of music. I'll fast forward in that through that same experience, the high school band wins this award in Ontario. Teacher turns around and he says, as a reward, he said, I'm going to take you to a tour. Then we're going to go to a tour of the National Film Board, Montreal, to do that. So here we are, we load in the bus, we go down to the National Film Board. And I remember to this very day, I'm 15 years old and in grade 10 and walking into this place and seeing what was going on. And one of the first encounters was a very special art called Foley sound. And Foley sound reproduces sort of the sounds we see on the screen by removing the sound that may have been there at the time of the recording and then adding in the footsteps or the fluff of a feather or whatnot. And these were men and women around tables or whatnot with a big, huge screen projector. And as it was being recorded, they were adding these sounds to go with it that brings more of an intense profile into the music. And I just looked at him. I said, hell, you know, if people get paid for doing this, then sign me up. And that was the full launch. I was rowing then. I was rowing at a speed that I never thought I could, going through my teens to finally end up by the time of 18. I was fortunate to get a job in a small film company and continued to play music. And in some instances, having gigs that lasted a year or 4 years, in one case in a lounge, of trios and doing work in radio. It was very, very enriching. And I felt that that was my purpose, that was a belong, and I didn't even know how I could ever do anything else. So fast forward to my career, my film career went into television, eventually brought me to Toronto, and I worked with the CTV affiliate in Toronto. You drive by on Markham Road on the 401, which they have a division, or certainly had at that time, called Glen Warren Productions. And the studio at the back was one of the highest floating grids in North America and attracted a lot of work, especially from the US, to come up there and work. The caliber of the talent that we could deliver was there. And of course, they benefited from the dollar factor or whatnot. But I got exposed to working with Jim Henson, Muppet Specials, to Elephant Man, to Taxi, to on and on of these productions coming in. It's really opened my eyes to even a bigger world, which hence 7 years later, working there as a studio director, I felt I had hit the ceiling and decided to jump and go freelance. And from that course on, my choices of doing freelance work were to choose subject matter that I could learn from, that I was curious about, and to launch myself into using the same creativity as an idea, but applying that creativity to the business end of it. There's two words in the business of film business. You need to have both those elements to make something go forward. And so the trajectory of that phase of my life from the age of 40 on, and working independently, producing, traveling the country, learning, again, it brought me opportunities just because I was wide open to do the last film on the group of 7 artists, A.J. Casson, when he was very elderly, and he came to the premiere at the Art Gallery of Ontario and passed away about a month later. I had the opportunity to do an interview with a former chief of the Red Bank Mi'kmaq community in New Brunswick, Joe Mike Augustine, who told me the story about uncovering archaeological effects on his property on the Red Bank Reserve that he tied into a work that he had seen down in Arizona in Sacred Mounds. And although they had filmed and the archaeologists came in to do that, nobody had ever interviewed Joe Mike Augustine. And when he was telling me this story, and I asked him, Joe Mike, did anybody ever interview you? And he said, no. I realized what I was in the presence of was oral history that had been passed down to Joe Mike's stream of family, whatnot, over thousands of years because the archaeology, the artifacts that they were finding went back to 8,000 years ago. And this story, when he told me, I went across the river in the scow and I followed the old caribou trail. And I said, Joe Mike, you mean moose, right? This is in New Brunswick on the Miramichi River. And he said, no, caribou. He said, in my parents' generation, further back, the caribou were here, but it's the climate change and the lichen, which is part of their food, was disappearing, and that herd still exists up in the Chic-Choc Mountains of the Gaspé. And it's something I've had the privilege of seeing again, that descendant. But that it was that storyline that I knew I had a responsibility to capture, self-finance, bringing in another crew to get going on that right away because I knew time was very precious. We finished it. Joe Mike was privileged, actually, as he was in the hospital. He was passing of seeing this film, and he went satisfied that he knew that the story of the village of 30 centuries had been captured. And we were honored to do a huge premiere screening in the community. So I'm not sure how I'm doing for time, but specifically, I mention these things because when we are open for a venture and adventure, these things come our way. And I think there's very important. So I wanted to say, before I just show you this very short video, that I use this reference of angels in our life. And it was a number of years ago, maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, that I was reading this book about writing for your life. And there was a chapter that opened and it said, angels in our life. And the question was, who can we think about? Who can you think about that had a major effect in their life? Because we have the possibility and the potential of really affecting others' lives, and therefore the idea of the angel that comes along. I thought back for a while, I couldn't think, and then it occurred to me, music teacher. And then I laughed because I said, what was his name? He was an Italian, Tony D'Angelo, Tony of the Angels. And that man, that one person, set this life in motion, that something that I live in humbleness and in humility, because it was a gift to me. And therefore, in my period in my life, I do whatever I can for young people who are very easily distracted in the world that we're living in. And we strive very hard to try to bring them into the fold, to show them the real powers of the imagination, that they don't lie on a phone or a device, that embrace your own potential, your own power. So I'll quickly bring you up to date with where we are right now. As Howard had mentioned, after working with John for 15 years, doing one play a year, we were looking for a sort of what I call a home base. And I remember clearly that one day when we were sort of searching this out and thinking about the same effect that we just mentioned about our radio station, our terrific radio station. It applies to, I think, the county. I see it as a miniature Canada. It's a large space with few people in. And the idea of a radio station over the air that we could listen to in our cars or in the tractor or whatever it might be was so important. And look at the great success it's had today. So what we've taken is that I happened to spot quite a number of years ago, sitting in a cornfield, a hay wagon that was for sale. And these are the style they call square balers, because now you see the big round balers. These are square balers that you used to load on this. And I turned around and I looked at it again and I said, it's not a hay wagon. It's in the agricultural community, but it's going to come over to the arts community. And from that point on, got our hands on it, and we have evolved Canada's only horse-drawn theater caravan. And I'm about to show you this and walk through it with you before. So the idea is that we are mobile as a theater company, which is very unique, certainly not only to here, but across the country. And I guess we could roll that film. Okay, I'm running out of time. I'm sorry? Oh, no, absolutely, yeah. So we launched the caravan, and the idea was going back to medieval times and making it as a new model of the medieval approach to taking storytelling to the community. And here it is, as you see it. And this is some of the work that we were doing, some of the plays you see listed. This was called The Boxcar Cowboy, story of a Hilliard boy who ran away during the Depression. Rosalia's Piano was about the war in Ukraine and displacement of people coming here to Canada, living in a small village. This is our work. This is back of Fort Station. But here we are, and here's our mobility. You see the wagon situated back in there at the Cape. Some of our plays, which we keep them as 2 3-handers. There I am up on the scaffold as we're working on new artwork. And after the caravan being launched and starting to move, it needed a new roof. And we were fortunate to find sponsorship to be able to do that. Introduce you to Susie and Sarah. Susie's the one on the left. Here you have Maureen Jennings, the author of the Murdoch Mystery series, who saw our work and hooked up with us to be able to doing some of our plays. And we enjoy with the horses in every one of the parades that you will see us. We bring the life, we bring our appreciation, our thanks to our sponsors. We bring the work to the community. Private Reuben Pierce, I found that story on a cemetery stone in Wellington about this man who left the farm in the 1800s, 1860s, and went off and fought in the American Civil War. And that was one of those things I questioned. And again, my curiosity drove me to write this work. We've now, as of last summer, bringing in a troupe. Some of them are from Belleville, some from the region. This is a spoof, a Monty Python version of Shakespeare, and very popular. And we positioned it right in the middle of 3 plays. And it drew a lot of very interesting people. This last year, for the first time, there's one of Maureen Jennings's play we did last year. There she is there in the middle joining us. So last year we placed it at, this guy, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, we placed it at Waringhouse, right? We call it Theater at the Roundabout. We're right there on the lawn. We're building our visibility. We're building our visibility to be able to track, and our audiences are growing. Being able to have, there's a mime workshop we do because we work very minimalist. We don't use a lot of theater or props, but being able to mime as a skill in the music. This is a reading series we do at the Wellington Library every year, where importantly, and this is a point I would really like to make, that drama is a tool for education. It's not just about entertainment. My colleague, John Burns, has a very extensive career in teaching drama in the schools and the impact it has on young people to be able to explore their own imagination. And our dedication, this is Sarah Kirby in the middle, along with John, who is one of our co-producers with us. These are the series currently, if anybody's doing anything this Sunday. In March, we have this play, a single coming up, and I think we're just about to preview. If not, this has never been seen. This is our lineup of our new poster series for this coming season, 2025. And this is a reading of the Christmas to Remember play that will be on a 99.3 FM that we have recorded. So in summary, there it is. We're called Theatre Roulant. We're very dedicated to what we do, but importantly, we understand that producing what we're doing is not only entertainment, but we could bring our regional stories to the forefront. We can influence young people to be involved with us. We have an opportunity for 2 students from Queen's Drama Department to work with us this summer. And there's our conviction, and there is our purpose, and that's who we are. And I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.